Okay, so I always find these cool articles that stand out and they grab my attention, and I feel like they have a little bit of what my message conveys as to why some of the things happen as they do. And so this article is out of Yahoo, the US, Lindsay Wolf, Scary Mommy. Okay, so I'm going to read this as the article is, and then afterward, I just want to tell you in the beginning before I start the article that I agree with this article 100% as to the positions as to why some of the things are happening in terms of Minneapolis, in terms of the LA 92 riot, in terms of the Watts rioting, in terms of the grief and the pain that people are feeling. And so if you oppose rioting, I have three words for you: the Tulsa Massacre. So I'm going to get into this article and I'm going to read it as it is written. So it's so damn important that we speak up about the explosive rioting that has taken place in our country. I personally refuse to stay silent about it because this is one epically twisted part of humanity, and it needs to be discussed. So protesters took over the cities, streets, lit buildings on fire, looted and damaged property, and endangered countless vulnerable human beings in the process. You may think I'm referring to the riots currently sweeping our nation in American citizens' protest and brutal murder of George Floyd, but I am not. I am talking about the Tulsa Massacre, one of the deadliest and most covered up acts of racial violence ever committed in our country. In the summer of 1921, black residents and families living in the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, were ambushed and many were hatefully obliterated. Thousands of white supremacists, including a bunch who had been deputized and given weapons from the city officials, stormed into the town, looted their businesses, took to the air to light buildings on fire, and they murdered hundreds of black human beings in cold blood. So this is a photo of that aftermath. Everything burned to the ground. So it was the aftermath of the white mobs that attacked black residents and businesses of the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Take a look at that. You'll see other photos as well. And so according to the researchers at the Oklahoma Commission of Study of Tulsa Race Riot, approximately 11,000 black citizens were living in Tulsa at the time, and most were in the Greenwood section. And it is estimated that as much as 300 black Americans were killed, over 8,000 had their homes, and over 8,000 had their homes destroyed. And so the fire department showed up way too late and blamed the innocent black Americans for why they didn't arrive sooner. And by the time the National Guard got there and declared martial law, the massacre was basically over with. Guardsmen also imprisoned a ton of black citizens and held 6,000 people in temporary detention space. And so, and I did mention not a single fucking white person who partook in this mass murder have ever been arrested and prosecuted or held legally responsible for the horror they inflicted. So, in other words, our country has royally fucked up. Secret that's been conveniently kept out of U.S. history textbooks and public knowledge until 1990. So, in addition to slavery, white people have also committed genocide against black Americans, and they have totally got away with it. So, this would be horrible enough if only it happened once. But then, white supremacists got away with the brutally destruction and murder again when they burned down the entire town of Rosewood, Florida in 1923. And here's a remnants of what was left. And this right here is actually the Tulsa riot. And so this was in 1921. This is another photo of that, of course. So white people have controlled the narratives and stories allowed in the history books and conservations for years, says Shea Martin, Boston-based educator and community organizer who worked is rooted in anarchist pedagogy and intersectional coalition building. So I didn't even know about the Tulsa massacre until I went to work in Tulsa a few years ago, and that international or intentional erasure, it's an intentional erasure of history of a thriving black community and the brutal state sponsored decimation of it. So it is white supremacy in action, and they can't see us thrive. So they kill us, and then they write us out of the history books. So it's up to us as learners, educators, and critical consumers to of the content to intentionally seek out untold stories of resistance and survival. So this painfully dark chapter in our country's history was totally swept under a national rug and hidden from the general public for years until eyewitness accounts surfaced and were added to the public domain. So you might be wondering how this is even possible. And well, the answer is so obvious as it is infuriating. So white supremacists has viciously dictated how we skew the collective narrative on our nation's past and present to unjustly favor and prioritize one group of people over another. So even if mass murder, theft, larceny, and looting is involved, here's another picture, and this is also June of 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. So this desperately begs the question, if the vast majority of white people are totally cool with staying quiet while other white people have committed genocide against black people, partaken in supported police brutality against black people, killed black people, oppressed black people, discriminated against, um, decimated towns and discriminated against black people, and quite literally looted black people from their native country to enslave them for over 250 years so that white people could achieve and maintain economic prosperity that we see today, then why is a single white person totally cool with loudly opposing a completely justifiable uprising by black Americans? Because white supremacy is a mental, physical, and psychological pandemic far worse than COVID-19. Unfortunately, I am not surprised at the police violent attacks on protesters over the past week, Martin tells Scary Mommy. So white supremacy is a violent system that was built on the backs and graves of black people. The system has been killing us for years, so I'm not surprised that the police are using force against protesters who are fighting against the system. Some people say, why are they burning cars? Why are they looting stores? I will not judge the way any black person in this country grieves and expresses their rage against a system that was designed to kill us and has been successful in doing so. So this is a photograph of also the Tulsa race riot, Tulsa, Oklahoma, in June 19 of 21. And so it's so fucking easy for white folks to look at a violent outburst occurring all over the country right now and make ridiculous bias arguments that it takes away from the issues at hand. It's much more challenging to dig deep, do your own damn research, and research. Do it. Do it. Please do it now. So own that white privilege and realize that we are fortunate enough not to have black Americans exact full revenge for everything we've stolen from them. So white supremacy has decimated the very livelihood of being a black human being in this country. And it is time for us to stop making self-centered and biased opinions about the matter and start fucking listening. So people see fires, smash windows, and call it terror. I call it grief. I call it desperation. I call it generations of pain on display, Martin explained. So George Floyd begged for mercy as he died. He cried out in desperation with his words until he could no longer. And black folks are tired of begging a system that thrives on our oppression for mercy. White people who say that we're taking away from the focus will never be able to fathom the trauma, pain, and rage that is involved in being a black person in this country. I wonder why they are more outraged about the damage of property than about the murder of black people. There is no right way to protest because protest is not a monolith. It is a nuance. It is personal. And in this moment, it is absolutely necessary. So I'll end by sharing an infuriating little tidbit from the past week. Donald Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, made a statement about why the president decided to walk across Washington, D.C.'s Lafayette Square moments peaceful protesters were abruptly tear gassed and shot with rubber bullets by police so that he could clear a path to walk through it and get a super awkward photo op. Across the street, Trump's apparent goal was to channel Winston fucking Churchill when the late Prime Minister surveyed on site damage after World War II. Once he finished his leisurely stroll, our president posed in front of a church with a Bible ridiculously out of touch. And act like that, religious leaders have gone on record vehemently denouncing it. So there is one particular quote from McEnany press conference that bugs the shit out of me. For this president, it was powerful and important to send a message that the rioters and looters and anarchists that they will not prevail, that burning churches are not what America is about, McEnany says in her statement. Well, you know that white supremacy is still alive and kicking, and I added that in there. And well, when our commander in chief feigns protection over America from the incendiary grief of black Americans, but has never, not once, granted black Americans the same fucking protection when their lives were literally depending on it. Thanks for listening.